Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the regular session of the Temple City Council for June the 5th, 2008. Please rise. Pastor Pat Dietrich with First Lutheran Church will lead us in our invocation, and Sergeant First Class Neil Shaw will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pastor Dietrich.
Let us pray. Oh, good and gracious God, we thank you for this day of work and recreation and the opportunity to serve in our city and in our community. I thank you for this community, for all of the opportunities to help people, to be safe, and I pray that you might always bless this city council and the government of this city, that they might use their wisdom, their knowledge to properly run the government and to please you as they serve their community. I pray, Lord, for our young men and women who are serving at Fort Hood and in all of the military bases, and especially for those who will be deployed very, very soon to Iraq. And I pray for your safety, even as I pray for peace in the world. Bless us this day, Lord, and I pray that you might always be our guide and our Savior. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Again, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Glad to have everyone here with us tonight. Our first order of business this evening is to present to a couple of our soldiers, Sergeant Sierra and Sergeant First Class Shaw. If you'll come forward, please. Sergeant Sierra celebrated her 6th year of military service yesterday, and we congratulate her. She served 2 tours in Iraq. And Sergeant First Class Shaw has been in the United States Army for 19 years. They both serve with the recruiting corps of the United States Army. And we thank both of you for your service to our nation, and thank you for all you do for us. It gives me a great deal of pleasure today to offer a proclamation from the City of Temple, Office of the Mayor, recognizing the birthday of the United States Army. Whereas the United States Army was established by the First Continental Congress on the 14th of June of 1775. Whereas the United States Army exists as the strength of our nation to defend the freedom of our citizens and our nation's security interests. Whereas many present and former citizens of Temple have served our nation and sacrificed in defense of our freedoms as soldiers in the United States Army. And whereas it is proper to recognize the United States Army annually on its birthday and to thank those who served and those who are presently serving. And now therefore I, William A. Jones III, Mayor of the City of Temple, Texas, with great pride, do hereby proclaim June the 14th of 2008 as United States Army Day in the City of Temple, Texas. And I encourage all citizens to join with me in this salute as we express our gratitude to those who have served and to those who are presently serving to protect our nation and our freedoms. In testimony whereof I witness my hand and the seal of the City of Temple, Texas, this 5th day of June of 2008. May I present this to both of you and thank you for your service to our country. Thank you. Next order of business is an opportunity for public comment. Citizens who desire to address the council on any matter may sign up to do so prior to the meeting. Public comments are received during this portion of the meeting, and we limit the comments to 3 minutes each. No discussion or final action can be taken on these comments by the council at this time. And tonight we had no one sign up to speak, so we'll move through this item into the next item relating to the administration of oath to a newly elected District 3 council member, Mr. Marty Janczak, and we have with us Kathleen Person, municipal court judge for the City of Temple, who will administer the oath of office to council member Janczak.
Thank you. Mr. Janczak, if you'll repeat after me.
Okay.
And raise your right hand. I, Martin E. Janczak,
I, Martin E. Janczak,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute
the duties of the office
the duties of the office
of Council Member District 3
of Council Member District 3
of the City of Temple
of the City of Temple
and of the State of Texas,
and of the State of Texas,
and will to the best of my ability
and will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution
preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution
and the laws of the United States
and the laws of the United States
and of this state,
and of this state,
so help me God.
so help me God.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judge.
Congratulations.
Okay. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you very much.
And let me present this certificate to you, acknowledging the fact that you've been duly elected as council member District 3, and now you've been sworn. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Judge. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. All items listed under this section, consent, are considered to be routine by the City Council and may be enacted by one motion. If discussion is desired by the council, any item may be removed from the consent agenda at the request of any council member, and it will be considered separately. This is item 5, A through M. Council, are there any items that you wish to be removed from the consent agenda? I show items I and J have been requested to be removed. Okay. Are there others? If there are no other items, I'll entertain a motion on the consent agenda, item 5A through M, except for item 5I and 5J.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Council, is there further discussion? There being none, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter.
Aye.
Councilmember Janczak.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Linda.
Aye.
Mayor Jones.
Aye. Item 5I and 5J both have executive sessions posted for them, their consideration of real estate, and we're going to put those to the end of our agenda this evening to expedite some other business we need to take care of and accommodate schedules of some people from out of town with us tonight that are helping us with some items. So we'll postpone item 5I and 5J, Council, if it is not a problem with you, till the end of the agenda. Item 6 is a first reading and a public hearing to consider adopting an ordinance establishing the City of Temple, Texas Reinvestment Zone Number 1 Tax Increment Revenue Financing Program, hereinafter referred to as the Master Ordinance, to be considered on an emergency basis. Ms. Bernard?
Yes, Mayor, could we take both of those items?
We can. I'll read item 7 as well, which is also a first reading and a public hearing. And if there's not a problem with that, we can take the public hearings together. This item is to consider adopting an ordinance authorizing first supplemental ordinance to the Master Ordinance establishing the City of Temple, Texas Reinvestment Zone Number 1 Tax Increment Revenue Financing Program, and authorizing the issuance, delivery, and sale of $10,365,000 City of Temple, Texas Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone Revenue Bonds, Taxable Series 2008, pledging of certain revenues and making provisions to the security thereof for the payment of the bonds, a paying agent register agreement, investment and commitment letter, and other agreements related to the sale and issuance of the bonds, and authorizing other matters related to the issuance of the bonds to be considered on an emergency basis. Ms. Brown.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. I briefly want to go over the projects that will be funded with these bond proceeds, and then I'd like to turn it over to Dan Wigmiller and Carol Palumbo to go through the details of the sale, recommend the lowest bidder, and then go over the details of the master ordinance. The proceeds of these bonds, $10,365,000, will be used to construct the rail park that includes
the rail park and the rail to serve the Gulf States Toyota. All of these are public improvements. That totals $6,781,000. Also includes proceeds to purchase 355 acres of land, project contingencies, and then the issuance cost. Add those all up is $10,365,000. Tonight, Dan Wickmiller with First Southwest. I asked him to come up and go over the details of the transaction.
Welcome, Mr. Wagner.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mayor, council members. I'm Dan Wegmiller with First Southwest Company. The place in front of you a sheet that has a blue border across the top that should have the bids that came in. What we did, as we did most recently with a sale for the city, we put together a term sheet and provided it to local and regional banks, giving them the opportunity to bid on a private placement. One of the efficiencies of doing that is that they don't require ratings and insurance, so there are cost savings to the city. And also what we want to make sure is we get a market rate provided to you on your debt financing. So for this $10,365,000, we received bids yesterday from the bidders listed. Bank of America submitted a bid. They provided two different options. One is a interest rate of 5.29% with what's called a make-whole call option, and the other bid was a 5.98% callable anytime after 1 year. The Compass Bank bid was 6% callable in 7 years. So the low bid was Bank of America. Between the two bids that they submitted, the make-whole option basically provides you a lower interest rate, but what they ask for or require in their bid on the make-whole provision is that you, in the event that you want to refinance that, we do basically a check to make sure that wherever they locked in funds today to do the 5.29%, that they're not at risk or at a loss to refinance your debt out. In essence, they don't want to, every time the market moves down a little bit, have this refunded out at any time. However, if you just want to make a prepayment and pay off the debt early, that is something that should not be subject to the make-whole. So in visiting with staff, it's our feeling, number one, the interest rate on a taxable basis is very low, 5.29%. So that's a very aggressive rate. Secondly, the possibility to refund this out on a lower interest rate basis is probably a fairly remote chance. But if you do have cash, you still have that option to pay it off. So our recommendation is to go with the make-whole 5.29%. Over the life of this loan, that's about $700,000 less in interest that you'd be paying over the life of the loan. So with that, I would be glad to answer any questions regarding the proposal that Bank of America has submitted.
So it's your recommendation that we accept the 5.29 and the risk and exposure in that regard is very minimal.
Absolutely.
To the city.
And we have seen experience where we've gone back to them and they have been flexible because, again, this is a loan that they are holding personally as a bank. So that is our recommendation.
And you said that if we pay in the event of an early payoff, they should not. Is it will not? I mean, that an early payoff is not subject to that make-whole? Because you said should not. So it is,
as long as it's not a refinancing, as long as
so no refunding, just a straight payoff. It is not. It won't be held to the make-whole.
Correct.
Okay.
Other questions? Ms. Bernard, any comments?
I failed to mention the repayment of these bonds are strictly from the revenues of the reinvestment zone. There's no tax pledge, and they're payable from the reinvestment zone. They're pure revenue bonds.
Okay. And that's the reason for the little higher rate than we've seen in those that are tax-backed.
That's exactly right. Due to the taxable comparison, a couple weeks ago, we sold taxable bonds in the open market for a high single-A, double-A credit right at 6%. That was a 20-year term. So as you can see, this is very competitive. And Carol is here to walk you through any ordinance items.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Welcome, Ms. Palumbo.
Thanks. Good evening. I'm Carol Palumbo with McCall, Parkhurst & Thornton, serving as bond counsel of the city on this issue. I guess just to follow up on Dan's comments, you do have two ordinances in front of you, and then real briefly I want to go over that. The master ordinance sets up general terms related to the issuance of tax increment reinvestment zone number 1, just related to that particular zone debt issuance. So it contains general terms related to the flow of funds, the issuance of additional bonds, and the reserve fund. I do want to point out two kind of important things. In this ordinance, we do not have to fund, either through a surety policy or cash, a reserve fund, so long as we keep the coverage within the tax increment reinvestment zone at 1.25 times debt service. So that is a savings as far as having to set aside cash for that under this. However, if we want to issue additional bonds payable just from the reinvestment zone on parity with these bonds, we would have to have coverage of 1.5 times average annual debt service. So those are some financial covenants that we are making in the master that would apply to any reinvestment zone number 1 debt we issue from here on out. The flow of funds are set up as that it comes into the account. We make provision for the debt service first, and then it flows down as available for any lawful purpose of the increment zone. So it doesn't have any general impact on your day-to-day operation. It's just we do make sure that we pay debt service first. The first supplemental ordinance is the first issuance of debt under the master and has the specific terms for this particular taxable series of 2008 bonds. So it contains the actual interest rate and the redemption provisions as Dan was describing to you earlier. It is important to note that this particular issue is being sold as taxable. You typically issue tax-exempt debt. This is taxable because of the nature of the improvements that we are financing. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. We previously provided a substantially final draft of each one of these ordinances for your packets. I do have, and we'll leave with Claudette, the final ordinance with the final interest rate after they took the bids and the actual redemption provisions. But I'm happy to answer any specific questions you have about either of the ordinances or the process from here.
Thank you, Ms. Plummer. Council, questions for council? No? Good. Thank you, ma'am.
Sure.
Any other comments from staff or comments or questions from council before going into public hearing?
Mayor, I was just going to point out, I don't know if your council memorandum notes it or not, but I noticed the chair of the Reinvestment Zone Board is in the audience also, and I believe that they have also considered this and favorably recommend this action also.
Thank you. Thanks for being here, Perry.
I have one other comment. Our estimates for total rail improvements related to that rail park in Gulf States Toyota total about $10.5 million. The remainder is being financed through other sources. So it's it's just close to $6.8 million on this issue.
I would also like to point out, Mayor, that the rail is not just for Gulf States Toyota. There are other rail customers out there, many other rail customers there now and hopefully soon to arrive that will utilize that rail park.
Great point, Mr. Jantek. There is a lot of activity out there, and it is a significant development in our Northwest Industrial Park. You're right. Thank you. If there are no other comments, these two items require a public hearing. I will declare the public hearings open at this time. You may come forward and address either of these issues, the issue of the master ordinance and also the issuance of the ordinance relating to the issuance of the bonds. And I'll declare the public hearing open at this time. Please come forward, state your name and address for the record prior to your comments if you wish to speak. Seeing no one wishing to speak, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Council, your pleasure on the first reading of items 6 and 7, together or separately, your pleasure.
Mr. Mayor, I would make a motion that we take both items together, and I move that we approve both items 2008-4224 and 2008-4225 as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Janczak. We have a motion. Is there a second on items 6 and 7?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion by the council? Comments from staff? There being none, Madam Secretary?
Councilmember Jeter?
Aye.
Councilmember Jansen?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Luna?
Aye.
Mayor Jones?
Aye. Item 8 is a third reading and a public hearing to consider adopting an ordinance designating South First Street corridor from Adams Avenue to Loop 363 as tax abatement reinvestment zone number 13 for commercial, industrial, residential tax abatement, and authorizing a number of other economic development incentives for property redevelopment. Mr. Green?
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. This is the third reading of this ordinance, and it's a little bit unusual, but after the first reading, we changed the boundaries of that zone a little bit, and we had to go through the process of doing some re-notification, advertising to the other taxing entities, and we are posted tonight for a second public hearing on this ordinance as well. This ordinance is an implementation of the Strategic Investment Zone report that was adopted by the council. South First Street is one of the most visible of those corridors. As we've seen in the last few months, this area includes really everything from the downtown area, from Adams Avenue all the way down to South Loop 363, and we've been working in that area. We talked about it earlier today with what's being called the TMED area, which is an area of educational research focus, and this really ties into it. So it's a gateway from that area and South Loop. It's how many people approach the downtown area from that area. The area is shown on some maps that are around this room, and if anybody would like to go up there, we've had a lot of input from residents of that area who have commented both on the package we're looking at in the area. We appreciate all those comments. I appreciate the hard work by Kim and Richard already in this area doing a lot of code enforcement. It's very appreciated, and we also have been meeting with property owners out there and also people that do develop commercial property in that area, and they've commented on the ordinance, and I certainly appreciate those comments as well. In this area, we're really proposing two different kinds of incentives. As the notice reads, we're proposing a tax abatement reinvestment zone for that area, and it is the city's 13th tax abatement reinvestment zone, and we're proposing it for a combination of commercial and residential tax abatement. And in that area, we're looking for minimum investment to be eligible for that, $50,000. And then we've got a somewhat unique package of other additional incentives for that area, and for those additional incentives, we're looking for more modest investment, but for commercial about $20,000, and for residential as little as $10,000 to be eligible for some of those incentives. The tax abatement program is modeled after the program we've used downtown, which, if you've been here for the last decade, you can see how much that's been able to achieve downtown. We've seen a lot of redevelopment downtown, so it is a similar ordinance. You've already established the criteria for that. We did a separate ordinance which has all of our economic development criteria here. It sets out the tax abatement criteria and guidelines for this area, which will allow 100% tax abatement for up to 5 years, increased value after redevelopment. And what this ordinance is doing is just defining that area. We've met all the requirements of law in terms of notifying the other taxing entities to do that. And the area is, go ahead, Alan, sorry, is roughly the polygon formed by everything on the east from about 3rd Street all the way down to the Loop, widens out near the bottom to 5th Street, picks up a little bit around the Temple College campus, comes back up on the VA property, and then widens and goes over to Main Street. And we've one of the changes we made in that boundaries last time was to include both sides of those streets. So we're excited about the possibilities of tax abatement part. Part 3, again, it's kind of a unique approach. We're trying to create a model here that we hope will work in some of the other areas, other strategic investment zones that we might have. And we also have limited funds, and since this is actually the city making grants of funds, it's the agreements themselves will be styled as Chapter 380 agreements, where we can make grants of public funds. Typically, to kind of extend these and kind of leverage those out, where we've tailored this package to be kind of one-to-one matching grants, where the property owner or developer is contributing some funds. We're trying to match that but also offering the potential in some of the cases of offering in-kind services where the city using our crews can do some demolition and things like that, which Richard and Kim are already doing, but we want to extend that offer in this area. And I think we've got a matrix here. I don't know if you can see that, but just real quick, the categories are facade improvement grants, and that's a one-to-one match up to $10,000. Sign improvement grants for demolition, removal, replacement, one-to-one match up to $1,500, or the city can do the demolition. Landscaping, one-to-one match up to $2,500, $3,500 if they're putting in an irrigation system. Asbestos survey and abatement grants, one-to-one match up to $1,000 for the survey and up to $3,000 for abatement of asbestos. Demolition grants, one-to-one match up to $2,500 for the city doing the demolition. And sidewalk improvement grants, again, a one-to-one match up to $2,500 with the possibility of the city doing some of that work as well. And finally, a category I think we didn't talk about at the last meeting, but the ability for applicants to waive some plating, zoning, and building permit fees. So those are the essential elements of the ordinance in Part 3. Fiscal impact, again, the tax abatement really only applies to increases in value. It would be abating those increases in value on eligible property. Part 3 incentives, you've got about $85,000 allocated in this year's current budget, and certainly the potential, as I said, for some in-kind services by city crews. And we are posted for a second public hearing today. I think there are probably some people here that have commented during the process and who maybe want to address the council, and I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. Now, for the tax abatement, and would that apply to residential property as well?
It could in this area.
Okay, in this
As it
particular
does
area?
downtown.
As long as it's an increase in the taxable value expected of $50,000 or greater?
Right.
Okay, so you can't just go out there and buy a house that was $60,000 and get a tax abatement on it
Has
and
to
not
be an
improve
increase
it
in
at all?
value.
It has to be an increase in value. Okay, very good. Other questions, council? On the abatements or the incentives themselves or the area? If there are none, then this item, again, is the third reading, but it's also the second public hearing. And I'll declare the public hearing open at this time. Anyone wishing to speak before the council on this item, please come forward and state your name and address for the record, please, prior to making your comments. Thank you.
Pat Patterson, 2116 West Avenue H. I just want to speak in favor of this ordinance. Mr. Graham has presented it to us. I served on the committee that set up, reviewed, and established some of the CISs back a year and a half, 2 years ago. I think this is a great ordinance because it partners with both businesses and private individuals with residences to encourage them to start cleaning up that particular strategic investment zone. Hopefully that gateway will improve, and based on the fact that we're trying to improve the TMED area, that should be the only benefit by this ordinance. So I strongly support it and would own properties in that area, and so hope to take advantage of the ordinance. Like to see it continued in the future, and Mr. Graham has indicated that we might work to try to do future ordinances that address other areas of our concern, and so very, very strongly supported.
Thank you, Mr. Patterson. Appreciate your comment. Others that wish to speak on this item?
Connie Stokes, 7273 Piping Rock Road, Belton, Texas. I think that this is going to give, especially South 1st Street, a really good shot in the arm, because downtown looks fantastic. You know, we've all seen the changes. I think since it is a main corridor coming to the downtown area, it's going to not only increase values of real estate, of residential and commercial, it's just going to make the street look a lot better, you know, with some improvements. So we too, of course, I'm an investor also, and I do have property on South 4th, and I'm looking to take advantage of this grant money. And we're, like Pat says, we are hoping that we can extend it to other areas, because we as investors, this is a good shot in the arm for us. because it kind of helps us when we get into really bad projects to kind of bring them up like we really want them brought up. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stokes. Others that wish to comment at this time?
I'm Beverly Hamby, and I'm at 1440 Eagle Bluff Drive, Troy, Texas. I'm also an investor, but I'm also a real estate broker, and I understand what other investors are looking for, and I also think that from the standpoint for the City of Temple, that it would be a great project. It would help all of us project a better image of the City of Temple as people that are unfamiliar with our area drive through our city. And I'm very much in favor of this ordinance.
Thank you, Ms. Hamby. Other citizens wishing to comment or ask a question on this item? Seeing no one else wishing to speak, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Other comments, Mr. Blackburn?
Mayor, I was just going to add a couple of quick comments. Economic development, as the council is very much aware, takes many shapes and forms and sizes in our community, and there's lots of different avenues and entities that are engaged and involved in it. And I want to say thanks to Mr. Graham and Ms. Fouts and Mr. Terrio, and I'll run out of time here listing all the staff members that have been working on our strategic investment zone initiatives. And this is one example of what may seem like a very small dollar amount when you look at the actual dollars that we're talking about here in funding. In the grand scheme of our budget and our economic development efforts, it's not a lot of cash dollars that we're talking about here, relatively speaking. But it is an incremental approach to a corridor into an area that we have tremendous assets, tremendous economic assets for our community. And I just again want to say thank you to the staff for the work they've done to present this, get those a framework in place to where investors in the community in that area can hopefully take advantage of it and continue to see that redevelopment, reinvestment in and around an area and in a manner that we would like to see that reinvestment, redevelopment to occur. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blackburn. Council, other council comments? Let me add my thanks to Mr. Graham. We've been working on this probably in excess of 2 years. I think strategic investment zones, and I think this whole concept and idea was a result of a conference that you attended, if I remember correctly, and you brought back the concept and the idea, and the council at the time adopted it, so let's move forward, let's develop this. It does sound like a way for us to improve specific areas of our community that we've talked about for a significant amount of time, and so this is a very significant event for our city to finally, after all the discussion, all the work by staff and citizens that have been involved in this, to finally move something forward, put some teeth in it, put some carrot out there, and help investors in our community to do exactly what the council has designated as a strategic objective, and that's to expand the tax base. And this is one way to expand the tax base in this community. And so this is very important and very significant. So thanks to all who have worked on this, from the manager through senior staff to other members of the staff and the community who've been a part of this through committee hearings and input. So our appreciation to each and every one of you, and hopefully that this is the first of others, that this should work the way we imagine that it will, that there will be other corridors within our community to invest in, because there are many, many ways to get into our community. And I don't know if that's unique to the city of Temple or from other cities, but there are just so many strategic entry corridors and gateways, as we've referred to them, that this can be a way for us to really significantly beautify our city and the way people approach the city every single day. So thanks to all of you. Council, entertain a motion on this item concerning the tax abatement reinvestment zone number 13.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the ordinance on the third reading for the tax abatement reinvestment zone number 13 for commercial, industrial, and residential tax abatement, and authorizing other economic development incentives. There's no further discussion, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter.
Aye.
Councilmember James.
Aye.
Pro Tem Bluder. Mayor Jones.
Aye. Next item, item 9, first reading and a public hearing to consider adopting an ordinance repealing ordinance number 1755, establishing the Airport Advisory Board, allowing the board to be reestablished by resolution. Ms. Phelps?
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm here, my name is Kim Fouts. I'm the Assistant City Manager, and I'm here on behalf of the airport. I want to start with just a little bit of background on this item. During the April 14th Airport Advisory Board meeting, the board determined that it would be in the best interest of the city and the airport to recommend a change in the membership of the composition of their board. And the change would include changing it to 6 residents of the city of Temple and 3 from residents at large. At the last city council meeting, Kyle McQueen came. He is the chairman of the advisory board, and briefed the council on those suggested recommendations to the board composition. And he also talked about some other goals that he would like to be able to accomplish out at the airport. The purpose of repealing the ordinance is to allow the board to change its membership makeup in order to increase the representation of both the Temple Economic Development Corporation and also our Reinvestment Zone Board. The total number of board members would remain the same. Staff recommends approval of repealing ordinance number 1755. If approved today, a resolution reestablishing the advisory board with the new membership composition would be brought forth to your next city council meeting, June 19th, following the second reading of this ordinance. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Ms. Fouts. Council, questions? I had one. I think it was on this side. Well, I'll find that during the public hearing, and then I'll ask at the end. But there was a clarification I wanted to get. This item requires a public hearing, and council, if there are no comments or questions you have at this time, open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak before the council on this item, please come forward and state your name and address for the record. The reconstitution of the Airport Advisory Board, repealing the ordinance. Seeing no one wishing to speak, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Council? Comments? No? Entertain a motion to repeal ordinance 1755, establishing the Airport Advisory Board, and to then reestablish the board in the ordinance at the next meeting. So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion? There being none, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter.
Aye.
Councilmember James.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Bluder.
Aye.
Mayor Jones.
Aye. Item 10 is the first reading and a public hearing. Consider adopting an ordinance authorizing a conditional use permit to allow the sale of alcoholic beverages for on-premise consumption in a restaurant at the Holiday Inn located at 5247 South General Bruce Drive on Lot 1, Block 1, Kenny B. Addition, replat number 1. Ms. Liley.
Hello, Mayor and council members. This is a new place for me. I'm usually behind the desk over there. And as you stated, today's conditional use permit is for a restaurant within the new Holiday Inn out on South General Bruce Drive. It's just it's on the east side of I-35 and north of the Midway Drive. Let's see if I can advance this. Okay. Oh, they told me to push a card, but I think okay. And that's a picture of the new Holiday Inn. It actually is 4 stories and it has 99 rooms. And what we're looking at is the front of the Holiday Inn, and that is along Tristan Lane. It connects on to General Bruce Drive. And this particular request does meet all the conditional use conditions that are required in order to grant a conditional use permit for alcoholic beverage sales in the restaurant. And so, let's see, that is the one of the site plans that comes along with the request that is actually showing the parking lot with the building in the middle. And as you can see, it has a landscaping It is an entrance off of a new road that was put in through the planning process, and it does connect on to General Bruce Drive. We mailed out 3 notices, and we received 1 response in agreement, and we did not receive any responses in disagreement. And the Planning and Zoning Commission recommends approval of this request. They voted 9-0 in favor of this request, subject to compliance or continued compliance with the conditional use permits. And so if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those for you.
Thank you, Ms. Larrabee. Council? Questions? Okay, there being none, this item requires a public hearing. Thank you, Ms. Larrabee.
You're welcome.
I'll declare the public hearing open at this time. Anyone wishing to speak before the council on this conditional use permit, please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Seeing no one wishing to speak, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Council, your pleasure on a motion on this first reading.
Motion to adopt an ordinance authorizing a conditional use permit to allow the sale of alcoholic beverages for on-premises consumption in a restaurant at Holiday Inn.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? There being none, Madam Secretary?
Councilmember Jeter?
Aye.
Councilmember Jansak?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Luna?
Aye.
Mayor Jones?
Aye. Item 11, first reading and a public hearing. Consider adopting an ordinance authorizing a zoning change from agriculture to single-family 3 on 24.1 acres, being part of the Maximo Moreno survey, abstract number 14, located on the north side of French Street, west of 42nd Street. Mr. Dole.
Mayor and City Council, this is a public hearing this evening to consider the zoning of some property of approximately 24 acres, north side of French. The applicant is requesting single-family 3 zoning, which would allow as small as a 4,000 square foot lot with a 20-foot front yard setback. And the Planning and Zoning Commission at its meeting on May 19th, along with staff, recommends approval of the zoning case because it complies with the future land use plan for residential uses, the adequacy of public facilities for water and sewer, and the thoroughfare plan showing French Street as a collector street. There is a plat that had already been approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission, which the applicant did dedicate 7.5 feet of right-of-way on the north side of French Street to bring it up to collector street standards. There were 7 notices mailed, 3 were returned, 2 were in favor, 1 opposes the request. And staff and the Planning and Zoning Commission are recommending approval of the case in front of you this evening. And this is a public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Dolan. Council, questions of Mr. Dolan on this zoning change request? There being none, thank you, sir. This item requires a public hearing. I'll declare the public hearing open at this time. Anyone wishing to speak before the council on this item, please come forward and state your name and address for the record prior to your comments. Seeing no one wishing to speak, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Council, your pleasure on the zoning change as mentioned for the Maximo Moreno survey, abstract 14.
Motion to approve the first reading.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Madam Secretary?
Councilmember Jeter?
Aye.
Councilmember Jansak?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Luna?
Aye.
Mayor Jones?
Aye. Item 12 is the first reading and a public hearing. Consider adopting an ordinance authorizing a zoning change from agriculture to office 2 with the additional use of laboratory manufacturing and laboratory scientific or research on approximately 63.8 acres, being part of the PM Mercer survey, abstract number 553, located on the west side of Old Howard Road, 1,500 plus or minus feet north of State Highway 36. Mr. Dolan.
And again, Mayor and City Council, the Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed this case at its meeting on May 19th, and both the Planning and Zoning Commission and staff recommend approval of the zoning case because for the future land use plan, it complies with the requested use. The thoroughfare plan shows both the Old Howard Road to become part of the outer loop and the Central Point Parkway to be both arterial roads, and then also the adequacy of public facilities, that the water and sewer is being provided to this tract now that's under development. I'd be glad to answer any questions that the council has.
Thank you, Mr. Dolan. Council, any questions or comments on this zoning change request? There being none, this item requires a public hearing. I'll declare the public hearing open at this time. Anyone wishing to speak before the council on this item, please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Seeing no one wishing to speak, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Council, your pleasure on the zoning change on the PM Mercer Survey Abstract number 553 property.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve that item 2008-4229 as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Janczak. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second on the item. No further discussion. Madam Secretary?
Councilmember Jeter?
Aye.
Councilmember Janczak?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Luna?
Aye.
Mayor Jones?
Aye. Item 13 is the first reading and a public hearing. Consider adopting an ordinance approving the draft comprehensive plan, Choices 08, including the introduction, community overview, urban design and future land use, growth plan, transportation, housing, economic development, implementation, tables and documents included by reference. Mr. Dolan.
Thank you, Mayor. The purpose today is to conduct your first public hearing regarding the comprehensive plan, and that I'll go over in a brief overview of the plan's elements and chapters this evening, and we'll look at the priorities, logistics, opportunities, and then finally to move towards its eventual adoption. The planning steps that have been involved with the plan so far focus on the identification of issues, some background study, goals, objectives, action statements, and action priorities, which will actually result in an implementation table that has been provided to you at previous workshops that you've looked at. And they divide their way into things that would be looked at for a immediate, short-term, mid-term, long-term implementation of the plan. The final draft has been recommended for approval by the Comprehensive Plan Advisory Committee. The Planning and Zoning Commission, through a public hearing, recommends unanimous approval from their meeting on May 19th, and it contains 8 chapters, which is included also into a executive summary that focus on the introduction, the community profile, community character in land use, transportation, and then also dealing with a growth plan, housing, economic development, and then finally the implementation. There's 3 key maps to be able to be included in this comprehensive plan and for your consideration. The first one is described as the community character in the land use map. The second one, which is different than any other plan that we've had in front of the city before, talks about a 20-year growth planning map. And then finally, it also discusses a thoroughfare plan. The other city plans that have been included by reference include the airport master plan, the aviation plan, the capital improvement project plan, drainage and utilities master plan, the parks master plan, and also the fire and rescue plan that's coming together. You try to ask yourself, the purpose of this plan is to be able to use for many facets for both the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council to guide land use decisions, also for capital improvement projects, and then also to be able to look at the idea that this plan will replace all previously sector neighborhood comprehensive plans that have been in place before this one. And the idea about the planning authority, both state law and the local ordinance, as you can see in front of the first reading of the ordinance that's attached to your agenda packet this evening, describe the reasons why we want to be able to adopt it. And then the plan development basically focuses on the community involvement and the community vision. The vision that the comprehensive plan had looked to describe would be that the vision of the plan would be families, merchants, and industry leaders choose Temple where urban suburban neighborhoods and urban centers combined with unequal medical facilities, schools, parks, and people to create economic growth and an excellent quality of life. Thank you, Alan. Chapter 2, I'll quickly run through it. That is the demographic profile for the city that looks at population trends, changes in our population, our characteristics for population, housing, economic, and also community comparison. The second appendix that's attached to it focuses on the updates from the census of 2000 for where we are. The Comprehensive Plan Advisory Committee and then the consultant with Kennedy Keys Collaborative looked at some population forecasts for the city and for the years, in the next 20 years, to hopefully be able to see that the population inside the city would grow to 30,000 to 90,000 population. The community character and land use is a little bit different than what we had looked at before. And just to go through some slides, they were both the advisory committee and the consultant were trying to show on the attraction for the city with our vistas and our terrain, also our rivers and creeks, and then also tree-lined streets, and those opportunities for estate lot development and also master plan development, looking at our parks for both kids and adults, and then coming forward to be able to take a look at the economic engines that make it possible for both large and small businesses and retail uses. Both our visibility and our welcoming community. Chapter 3 basically looks at 5 different areas to try to protect and enhance those economic assets that we have, looking at our long-term development and growth areas, paying in cognizance to revitalize our city core, and then also to try to improve our community image and our design quality. Some of the design considerations that have been looked at that's different in this plan than in previous ones were to look at landmarks or edges and nodes, some of our natural corridors, the front doors that we have onto the community that was described earlier this evening with the First Street corridor, neighborhoods and districts, and our building design. One thing that's different in this plan from previous ones is that the use of graphics and sidebars or illustrations to be able to help tell the story than just a paragraph-driven one. The new map that we have for the future land use map is more character-based, and the spectrum would focus on those things that would be suburban, urban, and rural. And we're trying to work to be able to look upon beyond individual sites for land use cases as they come forward, to try to also understand and recognize the impact of the automobile on community design, and also look at neighborhood conservation. You'll see 2 things that have come forward with the future land use plan. It talks about those urban and suburban uses shown within our 20-year growth area, and then also takes and looks at removal of quite a few industrial uses, except for those existing ones along Interstate 35. The future land use plan that's in front of you this evening, again, the central core of the city that may be looking in white is described as a neighborhood conservation area. And so those existing neighborhoods, they're both in north, south, east, and west Temple, that are developed or looked at as the neighborhood conservation area, essentially recognizing them as established neighborhoods. Some of the tan or yellow areas, as they come to the north, south, east, and west, would be those areas that were planned for suburban, residential, commercial, and office uses. And then the extraterritorial jurisdiction is looked as to be more of a rural or agricultural use. Chapter 4 is something new that's in this plan that talks about growth planning, and essentially it understands the reasons for our growth pattern inside the outer area for the allure of the green field and our city's cost-sharing ordinances, and then looking at rural water providers. A lot of times in the county areas you don't have zoning, and the land is generally less expensive, some of the natural amenities, and then also, as we all are aware, there are multiple school districts that offer an attraction to neighbors to be able to move into development of the area. Some of the growth planning tools that are mentioned into the Chapter 4 growth planning area look at the idea for comprehensive planning, any type of regulatory mechanisms, annexation, development agreements that have been reviewed and have been a part of the more recent annexation plan. The idea of looking into a public improvement district, which is a legal mechanism to be able to take a look at the development that could occur on the perimeters or the edges. Also the idea of the interlocal contracts with different entities, and also to discuss the extension of public utilities. The 20-year growth planning that is in part of Chapter 4, it's not a regulatory map, but it does direct growth to the more sensible and sustainable locations. It tries to avoid difficult-to-serve areas and promotes infill development. There's 4 parts to the growth planning, which would be the developed area, a growth area, a holding area, and then a protected area. It's to be looked at annually, to be revisited, and the type of things that would bring improvements or changes to the growth plan would be that if there were a large economic user that was attracted to the city that may require road, water, and sewer improvements, then that would be looked at annually to be able to bring that forward. Again, the growth plan is something different with this plan that's not been a part of the previous sector or neighborhood or the previous or existing comprehensive plan. The areas shown in the kind of the clear area or white area are those developed areas in the city now. The lighter green proposed what would be the growth areas in the next 20 years, and then the tan areas are reflective of what is the recently annexed areas in our extraterritorial jurisdiction. And again, that would be looked at annually. Chapter 5 focuses on transportation, and the types of issues and opportunities are there for those things that we look at regionally, locally, alternative modes of travel, and then also neighborhood safety and connectivity. The comprehensive plan recommendations that the advisory committee brought forward were to be able to try to take a look at least 5 different areas in here that would be part of the transportation master plan that has been discussed as part of your budget process. To be able to take a look at the outer loop connection from I-35 to 93, and also along an east and northeast outer loop alignment, and then the connection between 31st and Hartrick Bluff north of 93. The idea to be prepared for, if it comes in some form or fashion, for the Texas Transportation Corridor to look at the idea for connections and if possible intersections with state highways, and then looking at other corridor concepts in the plan. A couple of things that are different in this thoroughfare plan that are not on the existing plan was the idea to be able to take into consideration where our sidewalks and trail system and bike lanes are. The thoroughfare plan that you have in front of you this evening focuses on those existing and proposed arterials, which carries a majority of the traffic to get to your highway system, and then the existing and proposed collector roads, which are smaller than arterials, but provide access from within neighborhoods or commercial developments to get to the larger roads. Some of the work that's already taken place as part of the comprehensive plan was the Planning and Zoning Commission and some of the advisory committee. This is one of the study areas that's been identified by the comprehensive plan advisory committee, and this just gives you an idea of the area looking at between 93 and the Georgetown Railroad and 31st Street on the left side of the map and 31st and Hartrick Bluff on the right. And there was a planned collector road to try to travel from east to west, but some of the development that's already occurred with both Spring Creek and Deerfield minimizes the possible approach to 31st, and so one idea is looked to be able to come northward off 93. There's quite a few people that have contacted both the advisory committee and the planning department regarding this particular issue. Some of the folks are here this evening that may want to testify during the public hearing. Chapter 6 continues to talk about the housing characteristics, and the thing that is most interesting and not nearly challenging, but the idea of trying to add at least 130 or 13,000, almost 14,000 housing units by 2030 to be able to handle the proposed population to come forward. We do show that the median income is rising faster than median housing costs here in Temple. The idea of looking at economic development focus more on retail and office development and redevelopment to be able to see how we would be able to improve our quality of place. You'll notice quite a bit of information on Chapter 7 focuses on cooperative efforts with the college and different independent school districts to be able to try to understand its economic development importance to the city. And there are ways that have been discussed to try to support and retain the existing businesses, and then also efforts to look at training the community's workforce. The 5 buttons that are described that came out of the advisory committee was to try to be able to continue developing the healthcare and bioscience cluster, pursuing some type of non-traditional economic development opportunities, and promoting further logistics, distribution, and other light industrial investments, and establishing a positive image, again, as I said, for the Temple education. Chapter 8, which is the implementation section, or the implementation chapter of the comprehensive plan, essentially describes those methods and responsibilities and ongoing strategies, and it focuses on those things that would be related to regulatory or development ordinances, capital improvements, special projects, programs, and initiatives. The advisory committee, through the use of the department heads and staff, and with the leadership of the city manager's office, working with the different department heads and the supervisors, look to try to create some implementation strategies, and 19%, almost 20%, were looked at to be immediate, 27% for short-term, and then 17 and 14% respectively for midterm and long-term. 23% of these areas are looked at to be ongoing studies. And then most of the regulatory actions are in the short term, because after the comprehensive plan is adopted and the implementation begins, that it would look at to try to bring forward some type of group to be able to look at an expanded unified development code, which contains both the zoning ordinance and the subdivision regulations. The lead departments are also assigned, and as you'll see, that it discusses the idea for look at the implementation. This is just an example of some of the things dealing with land use, and if you'll see that there's all those action statements follow out of the goals and the objectives in the respective chapters. While they may talk about the issues and background, this explains it in a more succinct manner. If you take a look at the area of REG, regulatory, study means study area, policy would be a change in policy. Some of the lead agencies in this instance, for example, would be both the legal department and the planning department, or the Parks and Leisure Services. Again, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the council has regarding the choices 08. This is a public hearing.
Thank you for an excellent presentation. Appreciate that. Council, questions or comments?
There are a number of
Mr. Blackburn? Mayor, if I can, I'd like to make a couple of comments before you go into the public hearing. First of all, I want to thank staff for the work that they have done on an over a year-long project getting us to this point, and certainly our CFAC members. I think we had close to 30, 40 residents that volunteered their, or were volunteered perhaps, their time and effort and expertise to working on the plan, and I certainly want to say my thanks to each and every one of them. As council is aware, and many of you are aware, we've had over a decade since our last update to our comprehensive master plan. For a comprehensive master plan, that may or may not seem like a long time to you, but I would submit to you that for a city that is growing, over a decade to update your planning documents is a long time, and too long a time, in my opinion. So it was long overdue, and something that needed to be done. I'd like to give a couple of comments also in terms of what my expectations are for the document and what it will be used as and for, and then what it is not. And there's a couple of things that it is not. But one of the things that I think it does provide to us is a sense of overall direction for the city. It's a pointer for us. It points us in certain directions. And that's what a master plan, a comprehensive plan, in many of those areas that you've already been advised of, does for us. So it does provide some guidance and at least a sense of overall direction that we should be pursuing. I think it also helps us in a very good way to coordinate and incorporate multiple planning documents. As the city has water and sewer plans, as the city has drainage plans, as the city has maybe program and service area plans like a fire master plan, bringing all of those together, looking at those in a coordinated and a comprehensive manner is also very, very important. And it makes good sense from not just a planning standpoint, but from an administrative standpoint, and certainly a strategic standpoint from the city's standpoint to do that. Those are things that this document should do, and we want it to do. Now, what it does not do, it is not a resource allocation document. It does not allocate resources. It is not a budget. So it doesn't assign dollars and to particular action items that are listed here. Although, I will go back to the point that I just made a moment ago, and that is it should be a coordinated effort of multiple planning documents, and your budget is a planning document. Now, it's an execution document, too. I mean, it allocates resources, and it puts hands and feet to things so that we can go out and do things. But it needs to be coordinated with this document, and vice versa. But this document doesn't allocate resources. That's not what its intent is, nor does it do that. The second thing I would say is that this document, what it is not, is that it is not set in stone. And I think Mr. Dolan's alluded to that in one of the slides where it talked about at least an annual review of components of this. And much like your strategic plan and like your budget, something that you need to look at least annually and make sure those are coordinated and complementary efforts. So it is not set in stone, certainly not concrete, and something that we need to be thinking about each time. And then the last thing I would say that it is not is that it is not a perfect document. I don't think it is that either, nor do I think it is a complete document. But I also think that such a document probably will not exist, has not existed in the past, and will not exist in the future. The plan, just like the city, is going to always be evolving and always be improving, and I suspect that this document will be no different. The last comment I would make is in terms of the timeline and the general process that we're following. As I mentioned or alluded to, that we've had over a year's worth of planning efforts, citizens committee meeting and staff, and joint planning and zoning and city council meeting not too long ago to receive the recommendations from those bodies. In general, the next steps are, we posted this for public hearing tonight and first reading, but it's not my expectation, at least from my chair, that you'll be adopting this or considering adopting it until the earliest point, probably the end of August, in conjunction with your budget process and some other documents that will be considered or laid before you. My expectation is that you'll be receiving public comments over the next 30 to 60 days, both formally and informally, through these types of meetings and through all of the other venues and avenues that you and I and the staff receive those comments. And so I would anticipate that to occur over the next couple of months also. Your July schedule, as you know, from your budget schedule, has 5 potential work sessions in July for you. My expectation at the moment is one of those work sessions may be devoted exclusively to the comprehensive plan and some dialogue and discussion, presentation, especially focused on what I call the implementation table, and making sure that those actions as well as the priority assigned to those items are both accurate and complete in terms of what you would like to see. So I would anticipate that discussion at a council level sometime in July, and again, maybe a devoted workshop to that item. And then again, toward the end of August, hopefully, from my chair, you can consider adopting the plan in some form or fashion in conjunction with your resource allocation document, which is your budget. So with that, those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Jensen? Tim or Jonathan, one of my concerns is that we're proposing to adopt this as an ordinance. We're to put all this into law. How critical is that we have to do that as an ordinance?
Well, it's a legal requirement, both within the state law and our city charter. And I'll let Jonathan speak more in detail.
Yeah, and it's certainly something, as David says, this process is going to go on for a while, and we can certainly talk about it more than today. But just, I think it might be helpful to point out a couple of things in the state law that are listed in the preamble to this ordinance. And, you know, there's a chapter in the local government code, chapter 213, that deals with comprehensive plans, and it says that a city may adopt a comprehensive plan for the city, for the long-range development of the city. And if you read that by itself, you might think, well, we may choose not to do it. But there is another section of the local government code. It's in chapter 211, which is a chapter that deals with zoning regulations, which are also not mandatory but permissive. You don't have to have zoning regulations. But that chapter says if you have adopted comprehensive zoning regulations under that chapter, there's a section 211.004 that says that if you're going to have zoning regulations, you're going to adopt those. Those got to be by ordinance, and that you must adopt a comprehensive plan, and that zoning must be adopted in accordance with that comprehensive plan. So you take those 2 or 3 elements together, and in my opinion, it's permissive whether you have a plan, but the chapter 213 says if you're going to have a comprehensive plan, you have to adopt it by ordinance. Now, as I think everybody's comments, both Mr. Dolan and Mr. Blackburn's comments have indicated, you know, what is the comprehensive plan? I think reasonable minds can differ on what needs to be in there. In my mind, when I read this section, and I read that very important language that says when you adopt zoning regulations, they must be adopted in accordance with a comprehensive plan. It's talking about a lot of things. It's saying, in the same way that you might say about anything else, that it should be done with some planning in mind and with some process in mind. And the idea that there's a certain process you ought to go through to be fair. And really, I think the state law is really saying, in a protective way of a community, saying, look, if you're going to have zoning, you need to do it in a not arbitrary way. You need to do it in a very reasoned way. Have a plan and follow that plan and talk about why you're following that plan. But I think, and I'm not trying to get too technical here, but I think the law also recognizes in the same section that you have a plan, it is just a plan, and circumstances do change. And when you're doing zoning, you need to be able to talk about why you're following the plan or why circumstances have changed when the plan's been adopted. And so as we go through this process, I do think it needs to be by ordinance. I think we can decide how much of it is in the ordinance and how much is in supporting documents that maybe are studies or whatever that could be adopted by resolution. But a part of it at least has to be by ordinance. And we need to be very clear that that as we adopt it, it is a long-range document, and things about it are going to change, and circumstances are going to change. And I think when we do zoning ordinances and things like that, we always have to have that kind of analysis in there that says we are doing this in accordance with a plan. We've got a plan and a process. We have followed that process, and we are at least considering the plan and either following a recommendation that was in that plan or in a very structured, orderly, thoughtful way saying circumstances have changed since that plan was adopted, and here's why we're moving away from that. So that's a long answer to a simple question. I think an ordinance does have to be adopted by ordinance, but I think we have flexibility about what goes into there, and we ought to be very clear about the fact that that plan is going to change over a period of time, and what's required is not literal compliance or following of everything that might be in that plan, but looking at it and having a fair process and being clear about why you're following it or deviating from it. So.
Well, obviously, my concern is from the legal standpoint and the fact that we would accept all of this as law. Here's what's going to happen to our city, and your points are well taken. I have no problem accepting this as a policy document. Here's where we think the city should go. I guess part of my history and service, like on planning and zoning, one of the documents that this replaces, I think when I was chair in 2004, it had been amended 350 times. That doesn't give credibility to the document. And if we're for sure that we've got this pretty close to right, that's one thing. Based on calls and feedback that I've gotten, I don't know that we have in some of the things that I've seen. Again, I worry that we now accept it, or we will accept it as an ordinance, as a law, that this is the way it shall be, when in fact the course of human events and economic conditions will dictate where subdivisions will go, where retail establishments will go, and so on. And in the year 2015, a choice that we made in 2008 may not be appropriate. And I'm trying to think strategically in this entire issue with that and not create work for ourselves.
Right.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Other comments or questions from council prior to the public hearing?
Tim, and we have the ability to modify this however we want and then vote on it, correct?
Yes, sir. And then also, different than the 1988 plan, almost 20 years old, this one calls for the update to the growth plan annually, and then both the land use semi-annually and the thoroughfare plan semi-annually. And the other part to just take into consideration, I know we have the public hearing, what's a key feature in this plan is that if roads, water, and sewer are extended to an area that shows something different than suburban, commercial, residential, or office, the land use plan automatically updates itself to the next suburban use, and it moves it away from the agricultural use. So that's a key feature, and we don't have that now. So I think this would be another, to use an analogy, it's another good tool in our tool belt.
I'm uncomfortable with just one specific point, and it's actually relating back to the meeting of the 15th when we voted on the CO that had specifically one of the bullet points, and I construct a connector road between Highway 93 and Hartford Bluff Road. I ask, is this going to replace the road from 31st to Hartford Bluff? And I got very ambiguous answer. We're just approving money for something over there, and it makes me uncomfortable. We've got this here. We've got the road from 31st to Hartford Bluff in this document, but yet we have another document that says we're going to do a connector road between 93 and Hartford Bluff, and yet we've got people waiting over here to develop a piece of property that road is supposed to go through, waiting to know what's going on. We might not adopt this for another couple of months. I think we need to give some direction on that specific issue, if not tonight, very soon. There's development waiting for what's going to happen, and I don't think it's right to say we can do one or the other and just that land's not developable like it is. So that's my issue.
Other comments? Okay. Mr. Dolan, thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it. Appreciate your staff and all the work that you've done over the last year or more on this. I'm sure you can handle it, but you'll have to take over from Aaron now and keep this going. So, okay. This item requires a public hearing. I'll declare the public hearing open at this time. Anyone wishing to speak before the council on the comprehensive plan, please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Any or all parts? All right, Mr. Vogel.
L.M. Vogel, 6511 Springwood Court. Thanks for letting me speak. And I can tell that a lot of hard work has gone into this comprehensive plan, but there is a part that concerns the citizens of South Temple. And would that be possible to put up this thoroughfare plan on 31st Street to Hartridge Bluff? Can you put that on the screen? And
you have a detail of that
you can
put up quickly.
Yeah, it was called out specifically on the.
Yeah, but I didn't know if it had the thoroughfare plan in there. It just was a section of that land.
That's the one that shows the new office.
I think you might be able to reference through that if you want, because I think you're going to be addressing the fact that there's right in through that area is on the current thoroughfare plan, if I'm not mistaken.
Is that as close as you can zoom in on it?
Yeah, that's it on this particular one. Yeah. So.
Turn out the lights.
Well, could I borrow your pointer then?
Sure, you bet.
Turn down the lights, it would show better.
Just push the little red arrow there and. Okay.
I could exit out of the presentation.
Beg your pardon?
I think we're okay. Let him try that and see if we can
I
get there.
suppose this is 31st Street?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, 31st Street, Highway 93. The part that has us concerned citizens of South Temple, and especially the Deerfield. This is Deerfield here, is it not?
Correct.
And this is Springwood, I suppose, right here?
Yes.
Okay, the part that has us concerned is this road design. It was designed 2.5 years ago by a local developer, and because it was going to butt the south end of Deerfield subdivision and going to come across and butt the north end of the Springwood subdivision, we had great concerns with that, especially myself. I'm the president of the Deerfield Homeowners Association, and I also live right here in Springwood, so I have great interest in both locations. You have to cross Friars Creek, go to Springwood after it left Deerfield, and on to Hartridge Bluff, South 5th Street Road. In the fall of 2005, this same route was suggested by a developer. In fact, he had it to the P&C And because of the impact of both subdivisions, the cost of putting a bridge across Friars Creek, environmental situation with Friars Creek, a petition was taken up, and over 100 people signed this petition in opposition of this happening. The petition is delivered to the City Planning Department, and on December the 6th, 2005, at the P&Z meeting, the developer pulled this request. This is basically the same plan as 2005. I was here at the last meeting 2 weeks ago at the P&Z, and it was discussed that an alternate route might be workable, which you talked on a few minutes ago, from 93 over to Partridge Bluff and then South 5th Street.
That you can see it with that. I think it's proposed that dotted orange or brown line going from right there up the arc where it says possible alternate.
Oh, this is possible
Yeah,
alternate?
just
That's the 93.
That's the 93 to Hartrick Bluff connector, if you will, that shows an entryway from Hartrick Bluff as well as from 93 that proposes to open up all that property for development.
Right.
And not cross the creek.
I see. If this would be workable to service that property on the east side of Friars Creek, it would be a huge savings to the taxpayers on cost for a bridge. It'd save the environmental impact on Friars Creek, and the proposed, if you go this route from 31st Street east, it's not but about 3 blocks from 93 up to this proposed route. So right here, to make an east-west route, you've already got this right here. So you're not going to be gaining a lot by moving it up 3 blocks doing a parallel road. No, you're not. And we feel the east side of Friars Creek would be developed without disturbing the established neighborhood on the west side. We're hoping the planning department and the city council will give this serious consideration. But we are very concerned about it. Both subdivisions, people live out there, and if I understood Mr. Blackman right, there'll be more public hearings on this. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's you suggested there could be a couple months worth of opportunity for input. There may be additional public hearings, but as you communicated this week with all of us, that your email was forwarded to us, and there's opportunities to contact us directly, to have us come out there, us as council members or myself or staff to meet with citizens in the neighborhood. This is a significant document, and we're not trying to rush this through in any form or fashion. We're just trying to get it rolling. It's been working for 14 months now, and now we're getting into the official process where we've got something on the table to discuss finally. And so this is what this process is about, Mr. Vogel, and to get the input just like you're giving us today.
Right, thank you.
So,
well, that's my concern out there. Do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, expresses your concern.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Afternoon, sir.
I'm Scott Brookshire. I live at 2309 Winsong in Deerfield Edition, and that is my vested interest in this discussion. I appreciate the comments from you council members, and I think your comments were well placed. And my purpose in being here is to give you some background on the east-west arterial problems and solutions in this area. And I thought about how far to go back, and I thought, well, I'd start with in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. But
could you fast
I think
forward
probably you want me to leave some of that detail out. When I was on the council, we commissioned a corridor study for South 31st Street that was headed up by Jim Reed, the current CEO of SITCOG, and a planner named Molly Boswell, who was very excellent at that. And we paid for a good plan, and we followed it. The city has followed it. And in that plan, however, and don't let me have your pointer, Claudette took mine away when I got off the council, but in that plan, several maps were created from the plan and designated Arterial A, which was an east-west access from 5th Street over to 31st and perhaps on beyond. It got to the point where I convinced the council that those various maps were impeding development, because depending on what map you had a different impression of where that road was going to go and that artery was going to go. And so the council just struck it from the maps. And then later on we had an opportunity to buy the Georgetown Railroad, and Jonathan Graham and I thought we had really pulled off a coup because we had a contract for that thing, and then land titles considerations took that away, and Duke Energy went away, and the hike and bike trail concept went away, and so that left us back at square one. I think, as Mr. Vogel said, the artery, if there is one, needs to be further north. Actually, when you get into this, and I realize the deliberations are yet to come, and you'll have some opportunities to have various thought processes in this, but I think you'll find that, as always, if you'll just do what's fair, and I don't think it's fair to take the people of Deerfield's property and put an artery right behind their back fence, because when they bought those properties, there was no drawing. There was no proposed artery. And so that's my concern, that the people on the south side of Deerfield won't be faced with the prospect of a major artery in their backyard. And I appreciate your time, I appreciate your service, and thank you for doing it.
Thank you, Mr. Brookshire.
Hello, my name's Darren Harmel. I live at 6016 Pond Meadows. And I think I've changed not my feelings on this issue, but a plan of attack. I'm not going to read my 300 pages of type notes opposing this east-west road. I didn't really have 300, I just had one page. But I think because the process is now beginning, if you will, or at least the meat of the process, I think it's hold off on that. The thing I would ask the council to remember is a pledge by, I believe it was only one council member, Mrs. Tyrock, pledged to not cross Friars Creek in that area, because there's so many reasons not to, environmentally, financially, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I implore y'all to explore other alternatives for all those reasons, and plan on being very involved in the process in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Others wishing to speak?
City Councilman Lucas Wong, live at 6704 Springwood Court. I'm here as a representative for other neighbors that were not able to come here tonight, and a lot of them have expressed their concern about this east-west thoroughfare. When I listen to the comprehensive plan, I think it's good that we have a plan. I guess my concern is sort of what Mr. Janczak said. You're making a legal document, and then next you know it becomes a much more troublesome if you have to change it. It doesn't seem a very fluid way, or a way to easily adapt to the changing situation, nor adopt input from everybody. And of course, what I hear is that there's not enough input here, and I know that they've met, and a lot of times it's a really hard process to get consensus. But I think if there is an opportunity for people to just put their input in, then perhaps you'll have a much stronger plan than once you put it in a codified legal document. So before we even get to that point, I urge we have some more dialogue with the neighbors on Deerfield and Springwood, just what their feelings are before we put that through. And maybe between all of us, we'll have a better solution that will satisfy everyone's concern. And I see the need for development. I think that's what people would like to see, but I think we have to do it in a way that satisfies all concerns.
Thank you, Dr. Wong. Others wishing to speak on the comprehensive plan at this time? Great. Thanks to all of you for your input, for your time being here, and your tremendous interest in this area, but as well as our planning process for the city. If no one else wishes to speak, I'll declare the public hearing closed at this time. And council, if there are any other comments or questions from you or staff before we entertain a motion on the first reading.
I have a question. So, we're taking this for a first reading, and yet we're saying, so what happens next if it's approved? But yet we say it could be 60 days before the next reading. I mean, or so. approve it now and then what?
Again, my expectation would be that if council favorably considers it tonight, or if not, for that matter, my intent was to schedule it for a work session for you in your budget deliberation process next month. And again, probably one of those work sessions devoted to the item, and to talk about both content and process priorities associated with that. So items like the thoroughfare plan and where roads are designated or not designated in the plan, where they might be recognized or recommended by the CPAC body and by planning and zoning, and what council's thoughts on those are. But my expectation would be that would be next month, that those would occur, and then again, end of August, if council's of the mind, then we would consider the plan for some sort of adoption.
Yeah, remember at our last workshop, we were given that multi-page priority schedule, which is a part of this document in Part 8, and that's for our consideration and opportunity for feedback. Do we agree with the prioritization or not? Are there some long-term things we think should be short-term? Are there, immediate things that we think should be medium-term? So that's all part of the input process to come from us. Staff is now looking for that input from each of us and us collectively as a council, which I presume is still going to take some time and part of that deliberation process during the budget. So a lot of time.
I was also just sitting there thinking and listening to the public comments that came forward, as I know council has done and continues to do. But I was wondering, we're going through a process right now on our master plan for drainage, the drainage master plan update. And part of that process has had scheduled 4 meetings in each of the council districts to present a draft of that plan. And I haven't talked with staff about this, so I know I'm going to hear about it after the meeting. But I suspect that I'm just sitting here thinking that it might be advisable to have similar type meetings scheduled now that we have a document that people can look at and can comment on. It's not to supplant the work that the CPAC committee has done at all, not intended to do that at all, or the Planning and Zoning Commission and their review of it. But what it does is give the residents of the districts an opportunity, just like on the Drainage Master Plan update, an opportunity to see a document and to offer some specific comments and thoughts relative to that document or portions of that document, and then have council have the opportunity to have that feedback in addition to the recommendations and thoughts of the other bodies that you've had now that that document has been produced. And there may be some reasons to not pursue that, but I'm just sitting here thinking that that might be a good opportunity or a good process to add to what has already been, I think, a very good process.
Well, let me give you a little cover with your staff. I think not only is it a good idea, but I think it's appropriate because we've been doing the comprehensive planning process in the community. And so I think after having gone out into the different parts of the community asking for input, I think it's very appropriate to take this document back out to those same areas of the community and report back to them that here's the result of what you helped us start. So I think that's an excellent idea.
So I have a question then. Let's say right now we've had a plat for approval for that piece of dirt that the road is in the thoroughfare plan in this document is supposed to go through, and that has been basically said you got to have right of way for this. You can't do it like you're doing. So now with this another line that is an option, are we going to put a hold on that dirt as well? So if somebody then comes and says I want to do something there, well, it seems to me it's the only we're doing an either or in a document. I haven't seen us do that before in 6 years. We may be here, we may be here. I think we need to give some direction. There are things waiting, development waiting on these things. There are, I just don't like it. I don't like saying we may do this, we may do this. We voted on the 15th, and that's why I still don't get how we can say we're going to construct a connector road between Highway 93 and Hartford Bluff, but maybe not. That's just money for something in the area. I don't like it.
Gina, I think what you voted on that day was a funding document that
I understand, but I'm just saying it's bulleted out specifically like that, and I think that it causes. So we're just going to shut down.
I don't think we're shutting down anything.
To the contrary,
we have a comprehensive.
They will make the commitment.
We have a comprehensive plan right now, and this may replace that plan, or parts of that plan, or all of that plan.
So this
But-
has not been adopted, so it shouldn't impact development over there.
Well, I mean, if development is occurring out there, that development can move forward, and if they can be looking at the current plan, they can take into consideration what's being proposed here. It can go through the system, P&Z will look at it, the council will deal with it, and you'll decide that that is in conformance with your expectations, your plan, your process for the city. I mean,
So let me understand what I'm saying. I mean, if I hear correctly, if the plat was based off of the old plan, which does not have a road going through there, then that should be able then to go as is, since there is nothing to take its place.
that is the prerogative of P&Z and the council to decide whether that plat that is submitted is in conformance with all of the subdivision regulations and the comprehensive plan for the city. So, I mean, that is a question, and if somebody is sitting on a plat waiting, they should move forward. They can move
So
forward.
staff is not to say, hey, well, this isn't going to work because we may have a new plan with this road maybe coming through here.
Well, I think the staff may be able to express their feelings about what their recommendation would be based on good planning principles, based on the existing plan, and all those things. But I mean, there is no moratorium on development in that area or any other area.
All right.
And I would just like to echo those comments. That I don't think that any of the planning documents or work that is going on right now is or should hold up or has held up any development, at least not from the city's perspective. If a developer or a builder or whoever decides that they have some questions about a planning document or discussions that are going on, that's a decision they make, but that is not related to what the
To be
city.
clear, the plat is submitted, staff needs to shoot it through to P&Z, go through the process, and let P&Z deal with it. I mean, that's what I'm hearing. And if there are no exceptions requested, then why does it even go to P&Z?
Well, it still goes to P&Z.
Well, I mean, I'm sorry, but if there are no, it doesn't, I understand.
Then it wouldn't go to the council.
Right.
If it didn't have exception.
And a plat is one thing, but if it comes to the developer expecting the city of Temple to build a bridge over Friars Creek.
No.
then
I understand.
And at which point now we've got something to say about that. And you know, I can't see, personal opinion, the city funding a bridge over Friars Creek at this point. I don't hear any mad, passionate cry to make sure that that happens. And two, I'd be surprised if a builder and a developer does that. And at which point, I mean, I don't see what the impetus to do this other than there was a line on a map at some point in time, and there was a developer that proposed that, but that was addressed. That was going through Deerfield, and that development has happened back behind you. I forget the creeks of Deerfield or something like whatever that was, and we came to a very amicable working agreement on that. He's developed or developing his particular area, and then there was an alternative plan for crossing Friars Creek at one point that it was discussed. But again, I don't hear any mad, passionate desire from a developer's perspective to do that, and they're going to pay for it because I can't imagine us paying for a bridge, and we've got people that are wanting to develop in that area, and we've had discussions with some developers at this point about how to approach that and put money forward to offer to help build access points to help to develop that. That is in our best interest to make sure we provide a way to get that developed.
We just did
so,
2 weeks ago. I mean,
yeah,
we
exactly.
said we were going to put a connector road somewhere in this area, so I just think we need to.
So without saying that the other line's off the map, it's, you know, we're not ready to do that quite yet. But to say
that other line
from a
is
practical
not to
perspective,
impede, that other line, because it's not been approved, it's not to impede anything than the normal regular process.
I don't know if everybody can see the possible alternative route. Could y'all just show that with the marker?
just from coming off Hartwick Bluff Road,
Yes.
coming from the east, going into the development to be able to develop all of this
That
area
would
here.
open up the whole area.
And then going down and potentially even connecting so that then you've got a through route going out onto FM 93 at a location on 93 that TxDOT has given us some indication that would be a better entry point for the volume of traffic that this could generate than we had when we were considering down here going into Las Colinas and being in a very precarious place down a hill and around a bend. And thus we made the decision to, when we considered the plat of Las Colinas, to basically chop that off back here and say you cannot extend that back into that area back in here.
Till you get another way in.
Or we, get a different way in, at which point this was still an option, but we'd cut off or we didn't, but the developer agreed to not come across Friars Creek at this point, like was originally proposed, I think, was where one of the alternatives for that east-west route was going through here and through Deerfield, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right, Mr. Vogel? Is that the one you were concerned about initially?
Collectors. Accommodate all the
Collectors,
traffic there.
Well, yeah. So, anyways, here's what's right now been considered, and actually some dollars were allocated through that CO to potentially assist with some entryways here.
That's nice, Alan.
If in fact, did I do that?
No, Alan did.
Oh, maybe I did that so many times.
Well, it worked.
Okay.
Well, anyway.
I'm sorry.
No, we're good.
Well, I have to expand on your comment. I guess I'm concerned with not just the road, but as this has occurred, and our corporate knowledge is sitting over here in the audience, but of what we've done here with this entire area, and we're getting close to the end where the decisions that are made are going to keep it there forever. And will we as the city, the council and the staff and the city, have done something to preclude any of these property owners from utilizing their property? I guess I need to be reassured by the planners or whomever that if we do something, if we do that, is that going to keep somebody that owns that tract from getting to it or utilizing it? Don't we have to ensure, we don't have to pay for it, but we can't preclude access for individual property rights?
But we don't have to pay for it.
But we don't have to pay for it.
But I guess
we're trying to do everything we can at this point.
I'm all for a road I'm not necessarily for spending tax dollars to open up areas just in and of itself for development. I think that's developer responsibility. But I am definitely for relievers for congestion and public safety and those things. And I think that we do need to deal with issues on Harker's Bluff. I mean, I think the 93 issue, I think that one makes sense, and I agree. I mean, that one, to me, from just looking at it, not being an engineer, Marty, I think that actually opens up more opportunity and can do more for that. So, I mean, I just, as long as that it's not going to hinder anything and that people can move forward with what they got going, that's all I want to know.
I would not disagree with that at all. I'd like to have one of the smart guys in the planning department or wherever say that, yeah, if we do this, that's not going to cause some future problems. That we will incur a liability. We, the city, would incur some sort of liability.
I want to prick your thumb, have you sign blood. Yeah.
There you go. I guess this also illustrates my point. If we approve this as designed, then does that become gospel?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
I don't want to belabor the point any, but if you remember when we went through the PowerPoint presentation, there were a half a dozen areas to be looked at more closely on the third floor plan. This is one of those 6.
Okay.
One of the things.
Going back. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, David.
No, I was just going to say one of the things that I did challenge the CFAC committee to do, and they took the challenge on, was get something on paper. Bring something forward so that folks, both on this side of the dais and on that side of the dais, can begin the dialogue to get to a plan that is workable and livable for the community and the residents. And so, again, I would view the document in part for that. They put something on paper. They got something to us that represents their best efforts, collective efforts, but again, not necessarily what will be the final product. And I think that was also very clear in the discussions with them also.
And we have the opportunity, the obligation actually, to update this semi-annually in this particular area, and there's nothing preclude us from updating it more frequently than that, should there be development that occurs that compels us to make changes to that document even more frequently than that.
So, a different question then. The proposed item here, 4230, is this really saying, yes, we, the council, will accept this draft plan?
No. We're agreeing to take it to another reading.
It's on the first reading.
I mean, we're agreeing to move it forward.
And it doesn't mean that there can't be changes and modifications to do what Mr. Dolan suggested, that there may be some or a majority of that we don't necessarily, or Mr. Graham related to it in law, that it won't necessarily be part of the ordinance. That it could be some other attachment or whatever that, it isn't changing the ordinance every time we do it. But there's a component that will let us comply with the zoning laws that we have adopted, which require us to have a comprehensive plan. So but it doesn't define what a comprehensive plan is necessarily, except that it guides those ordinances and the zoning, and the zoning has to be in compliance with whatever comprehensive plan you adopted. Is that correct, Mr. Graham? Did I state that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
I mean, this is one of those times, under our system, we're going to have 2 readings of an ordinance by charter, unless it's emergency or something else. And this is one of those times where, I mean, as the city manager said, I mean, this is going to be a process that's going to take some time. So I would just view this at the end of the spectrum. This is the first reading, and you may end up having more than just 2 readings on this. You may have public hearings in the middle. You may have workshops. You may have dialogue.
Well, there have been times.
Like we just did.
That's what I want to be clear of.
Yeah.
I've had difficulty accepting this document the way it is right now today, but if we have further input.
Like we just did with the SIDS.
Okay.
Yeah,
that one
that's
only
fine.
required 2 readings, or 1 public hearing, but because we made what we felt were substantial changes, we came back and actually had another public hearing.
But there's lots of first readings that I don't agree with, but I'll vote yes to move it to the process.
Right.
Just to get that's his deal. I voted yes,
Like
but
a
I wanted
motion and a
some
second
changes.
doesn't mean you got to vote for it because you make a motion or a second. So it just means to move it through for the consideration.
The ball is now
process.
rolling.
You got it. Okay.
I understand. Thank you.
You bet. Other comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion on the first reading of the comprehensive plan, choices 08.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the first reading of the comprehensive plan, choices 08. If there's no further discussion, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter?
Aye.
Councilmember Jansak?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Lennon?
Aye.
Mayor Jones?
Aye. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your input on this item, and we look forward to continued dialogue and input as we move this along over the next weeks and months. Item number 14 on our agenda is consider adopting a resolution appointing 4 at-large members to the Temple Medical Education District Coordinating Group. Mr. Blackburn.
Mayor and Council, I have 3 names to recommend to you tonight. Just briefly by way of background, the 4 representatives that are still vacant, you have a letter of understanding that was executed with the primary stakeholders in regard to the TMED district, and that letter identified 4 representatives to be appointed at large. One of those was suggested or recommended to be my position, the city manager's position, but there are also 2 other positions that were recommended to be what we deemed commercial, or what was deemed to be commercial property owner seats or slots on the TMED coordinating group, and then one that would be a residential seat. And that residential seat would be a resident living in that area. I'm not prepared tonight to offer a recommendation to you on the resident. We're still looking at that option and trying to fill that seat. But I do have 2 names for you to recommend for the commercial property owner slots. One of those is Lloyd Thomas with Aldrich Real Estate, and the other is David Jennings with State Farm Insurance. Both of them have indicated an interest and would like to serve on this group, and I'd make that recommendation to you for those 2 names. We'll come back to you at a later time with regard to the residential seat.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Blackburn. Council, we have recommendation of Mr. David Blackburn in the city manager slot, Lloyd Thomas and David Jennings in interest individuals to serve on the board for the TMED district coordinating group. Any comments? Is there a motion for approval of those recommendations?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the recommendation of appointing Lloyd Thomas, David Jennings, and David Blackburn to the Temple Medical Education District Coordinating Group.
Thank you, Mr. Zach. We have a motion and we have a second from Mayor Pro Tem Luna. Any other comments or discussion? There being none, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter.
Aye.
Councilmember Jansak.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Luna.
Aye.
Mayor Jones.
Aye. And we'll at this time jump back to the beginning of our agenda on item 5, I and J. I is to consider adopting a resolution authorizing the purchase of a 177.45 acre tract of land at 1122 Moores Mill Road. That item is posted for executive session if required or requested by the City Council or staff. And item 5J is to consider adopting a resolution authorizing the purchase of an approximately 356-acre tract of land located at Wendland Road. Also, that item is under Section 551.072 of the Texas Government Code, posted for executive session to discuss the purchase, exchange, lease, or sale of real property. That public discussion, which may have a detrimental impact on the negotiations. And I believe at this time there is a request to go into executive session on these two items. So at this time we'll recess the council meeting at 6 minutes before the hour of 7, and we will resume back in regular session at the completion of the executive session with possible action anticipated on these items. I think they can just come. Yes. We're in recess. Ladies and gentlemen, time now is 7:25, and we will reconvene our regular meeting of the Temple City Council for June the 5th. We have two items to consider on the agenda, items 5I and 5J. Item 5I, again, is to consider adopting a resolution authorizing the purchase of a 177.45-acre tract of land located at 1122 Moores Mill Road. And item J, consider adopting a resolution authorizing the purchase of an approximately 356-acre tract of land on Wendland Road. Mr. Graham, we've
obviously discussed this in executive session. I'd be glad to provide any additional detail. The first item is the purchase of 177.45 acres at 1122 Moores Mill. The purchase price is $5,000 an acre with some reimbursement TDC for the original option surveying and phase 1 environmental assessment they did. The total closing costs on that is going to be about $931,338.62. And the other items, if you'd like me to go ahead on that.
Sure.
I don't have the final numbers on the total closing costs, but the purchase price, it's a little less than 356 acres. I think we just got the survey back, and it's fractionally less than that, but it's 7,500 an acre, and funds, as Ms. Bernard said, are appropriated out of the reinvestment zone for that acquisition. Answer any questions you might have. I do recommend these purchases.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. Ms. Bernard, anything on the financing side, any comments? I think we've taken action last month on revising the financing plan and included these in those dollars.
Yes, as Jonathan mentioned, the reinvestment zone board had approved recommended the amendment to the financing plan to the city council. That has been approved, and funds are appropriated, and we have also issued whatever bonds or whatever necessary to fund these two purchases.
Thank you, Ms. Blackburn, any concerns? Council, questions for staff? Or a motion on item 5A and 5J, independently or together, your pleasure.
Aye. Did you say aye or J?
I and 5J?
Yes. Okay.
I'm sorry.
I thought I heard you say A, but...
Oh, I'm sorry.
I meant I and J.
Motion to approve both of them together, 5I and 5J.
A motion, thank you, sir.
Second.
And a second. Any further discussion? There being none, Madam Secretary?
Councilmember Jeter?
Aye.
Councilmember Jansen?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Luna?
Aye.
Mayor Jones?
Aye. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we've worked our way through an agenda this evening. Thank you very much for your attention, and we are adjourned. Good night.